you are aware, the entire world is going through an extraordinary emergency. And as such, I and the government will do everything in our power to ensure that we as a nation shall not suffer such terrifying outcomes as a result of this current COVID-19.
When the president announced that there's going to be a lockdown, it was a big shock to most of us because the church was not prepared for this, I tell you. And many members also are not prepared for this. But through this, we want to thank God because He provided an opportunity, and as a communication, it was a good opportunity for the team members to come out of their cocoon, or rather to come out of the hall they're used to, because communication, what most people know, are back-end people.
Initially, I'd say I don't think there were any fears to begin with, because we all thought it would be temporary, yeah. So it was a nice diversity that was coming into our whole worship experience. And then now a few weeks past, a month, and it's like, wow, we're still at home. You know, we still have to do this thing online. So then now it moves to, okay, so now what does that mean? You know, does it mean that we're not going to see people anymore? Does it mean that we stopped being Christians because we can't go to church anymore? And then I guess now until various ways of worshiping came up, that's when I guess now different churches were scrambling to see how, you know, you can still continue with the worship experience, just not the way we're used to it.
Actually, it was not easy for us because we were caught unaware. And we did not even have time to organize our members so that we can know how they will continue with the worship. We remained in church and the members are out there. So we had to sit down and figure out a way out on how we can be able to reach our members. Unfortunately, in the church by then, we didn't have an online service. Therefore, we had just to figure out and start from zero.
I think the first experience was a lot of anxiety. At some point you felt disconnected. You felt disconnected from church, from everyone, and you know, having to stay at home. You felt quite disconnected with everybody and everything. But as time went on, we started realizing that the new normal wasn't so bad.
Let me admit that it was not easy because I had never had such an experience before. You know, all through we are used to one-on-one. In my ministry, I'm always used to one-on-one. It was the first time that I imagined that I can be able to communicate with the members that I may not be able to see. The first thing that we were able to do is to organize some WhatsApp groups where different departments could have a WhatsApp group, like the women ministry, the youth, the elders, the church bond. There were so many WhatsApp groups, and I think I was in every WhatsApp group. Then the next thing was now, our WhatsApp group is somewhere where you text, and then someone may reply. Sometimes there are so many text messages, and you may not be able to communicate well. So we had to look for a virtual way of reaching these members. The next thing that I did was to organize an SMS that would be sent to each and every member. Fortunately, we had some numbers of our members. Then I personally embarked on calling members on individual basis. Then from there now, we were blessed with some equipment, and sometimes we could deliver the message there and you could see members commenting down there. Then that one made me somehow feel that we are really connected with the members. Even if they are not physically present here, we are connected out there.
So 14th March 2020, President announces that the church is closed. We are surprised because no one expected this. As a church, you know, our priority is just one. The word of God is the fire that has to keep burning, from Isaiah 10:17. So this fire is basically the whole purpose for which the church is here.
At that time, it was not easy because we didn't have even the background, we didn't have any equipment, we didn't have a camera, all those things we didn't have. I think the first proposal that came to our mind was to use a phone. And you can imagine Parklands SDA Church using a phone. But anyway, that's where we started. I remember we just borrowed a member who had an idea of how a phone can be able to work. I just remember by then when I followed some young people in social media, they were saying that just recently pastors were preaching that Facebook is from the devil, but now they are telling us to follow and join. So I just laughed at myself, but immediately we called a meeting. Immediately we ended to call a meeting. First of all, we called the elders. We tried to think of a way out. And then we formed a committee that comprised of some elders and the communication team. And from there, we had to chat a way out on how we can go about it.
Down deep in my heart, I believe Parkland is the best church to be pastoring currently. Number one, it was like I was a new kid, so they loved me, the welcome, the invitation, the leadership as well as the congregation, they fully supported me. And with my nativity, they taught me how to do things. So there was no challenge actually. I enjoyed because I learned as they were showing me how to do things.
No infrastructure, we began with a phone. Having a media ministry involves a lot of processes. One, you have to have a team, a very vast team. You also have to train them. 3, you have to have equipment. You have to have a plan as a church to have all this together, and then you have to have the vision of the pastor on where he wants the church to go. Fortunately, we have young people in this church who, from their backgrounds, have an interest, a deep interest in this. I was a new elder at the time, and with a background in technology. We also had elders who stood up to the call. They sat down quickly, put together the resources. Then we came up with a plan. We sat down, developed a plan on equipment, on resources. And then with that, we are now able to acquire the technology, acquire all the resources we need, and brought our members on board through programs that were relevant, well-researched, aimed at meeting their specific needs. What surprised me greatly was the dedication of the team we put in place to run this whole thing. The young people who we called last minute, put in the time to do production, to do camera work, to organize the pulpit, to organize the church, to communicate. That really surprised me pleasantly, and I thank God that we were able to do that.
Yeah, there are so many things that surprised me actually, because for me and the Haiti, we are not compatible. So I totally did not have an idea, but I want to tell you I was surprised by the effort that the young people in the church and put at that particular time. They came up with a list of things that we need. Some of them I cannot even recall their names, mixer, cameras, this. Then another thing also that surprised me is along the way we were able to put up some equipment, and the first one of the challenges that we encountered now was the buffering. Sometimes we could go, then the picture is not very clear, but we graduated to a better camera. Then later, what also surprised me is that there is a member who volunteered single-handedly together with his family to give a camera, an extra camera, as an offering to God. So the issue was full of surprises.
It wasn't until recently, when we were having online evening services to console with one of our members who had lost a loved one, that it hit me how necessary and powerful the online services can be. Because you would find up to 100 people plus attending that evening worship. And before, 100 of us wouldn't have been able to fit in that person's house. But because of this online avenue, we are all managing to congregate together and, comfort the bereaved family and talk with each other and fellowship one another. So that's when I discovered that the online services is not entirely a bad thing for the church community.
Nowadays you have the option of watching worship from around the globe. You can go anywhere. But there is a way in which following the services at Parklands just brings you back home to familiar people, to people who you connect with, to familiar surroundings, and it feels better, it feels more at home. So I think live online worship for us as Parklands, as a church, is important, also in preserving our identity, because you can watch the sermon, but when it moves to other activities, then you get lost. So it's always good when you have your own church, your own programs. I mean, we have programs that are going on, like the development program, which we would want to still follow up on. So it feels at home to be on the online Parklands worship.
The team that we have in communication may seem a small team, but it's not a small team as such. I'll tell you why. It's very hard to find a small team of young men and ladies who are committed to do the work of the Lord. And as a church, we are really grateful of these team members of communication, because they are really dedicated in doing their work. It may seem a small team because we only have a team of 13 members who span across the various categories of the department. You're talking about personnel to do with sound, you're talking about camera guys, you're talking about streaming, you're talking about online content, you're talking about graphic designers, you're talking about production managers, you're talking about set managers. So if you look at all these categories and try to divide the 13 members of the team, you may see it may seem like a small team, but dedication is what really comes in strongly in that team. And also of course, as you look at it in terms of managerial perspective, flexibility and speed, because if you have a small team, then it's easy to organize, and it's easy to collaborate with the team members and really come out to work closely together. And after working together for a while, it now seemed like a tribe, it now seemed like a family. And I think looking at it as a family, it's really bringing us together, and we can easily work together as a team because we look at each other, we take care of each other as family members. So to me, it's not really a small team, but I'm encouraged by the dedication of these young men and ladies in the team.
Communication has been quite a good task for me. It's been a wonderful experience coming to work with people who are well experienced in this field. Being my first time in this field, I've gained quite good knowledge in communication, and also been able to take this opportunity to also spread the gospel of God when it comes to communication in terms of the church and also helping out. It feels great, it feels wonderful to be a part of this community.
Behind the scenes, a lot of effort go into making sure that there is actually content to be streamed. I think that's one of the major things that must be there for us to actually have live streaming. And many departments are involved in making sure that this content is actually available. Whether you're talking about Sabbath School, whether you're talking about communication as the coordinating department, whether you're talking about the elders, pastors, and all that. But content is key in all these conversation. Apart from that one, of course, now we have an element of marketing. There must be posters that are done to actually sensitize the members that there's actually going to be a service, or there's actually going to be an event. And then, of course, apart from that, we also have now the technical details that goes behind the scenes. The team have to be before the event, just before the event, and even a few days to the event, they have to make sure that the items that are supposed to be used for streaming are actually available. If you're talking about probably a camera, are they in good condition? You're talking about the microphones that are supposed to be used that day, are they in good condition? You're talking about even small things like batteries to be used for microphones and all that. So if you look at the technical details, you're talking about different elements. You're talking about sound. You're talking about the streaming team. You're talking about camera guys who are supposed to be behind the camera. You're talking about the online team, the team members who engage our members online, and just to get to know how they are doing, and also in the chat, just to engage the members and the online audience. And apart from that one, I also talked, let me also mention about production managers. These are members of the team who are supposed to make sure that the program is flowing as required, and also the participants are available at the right time, the time they are required to take part in the program.
Before you see a program in front of your screen, we usually have several meetings. We have meetings with the departmental heads. We have several meetings even with the people in the communication department. We plan the program and say, like, this time, this is what that will be running, so that you can be able to even have quality programs, because planning early makes it easier for us to have smooth streaming and smooth planning. And also there's that content that you're able to prepare if you plan early than when you're just called to the stage and told to do something. So planning early really makes it work for us, and so we are able to bring all the programs that you see before you.
A lot of things can go wrong, because in a production environment, or rather in a streaming environment, you are using equipment that are made with human hands. Of course, as much as this is a church event, and the items that are used for this service are prayed for, but you're using items that are made of human hands. You're talking about cameras, you're talking about microphones, which can be affected because of one reason or another. And for those who have attended any of our online worship, you've seen some of these technical hitches that are seen online, whether you're talking about sound, because probably there's a problem with the mixer or the sound system. and many other, technical issues. I also talk probably about the software. You're using a software to do the streaming. Something can go wrong with the software. Talk about participants. Sometimes a participant can promise to be here in good time, but something happens on the road and they're not here in good time. And those are some of the things that can really affect the streaming service for the church. You can also talk about internet. Something can happen with our internet provider and there's no internet. This will really affect the streaming. You're also talking about energy, or rather power. Power can go off, affecting some of course, over time we have tried improve our equipment. So we are seeing less of this, but if power goes off, of course there's a chain of reaction in terms of the equipment that are used for this service, and one equipment can be affected. Talk even of just light. There can be a blackout, and the quality of the video you're getting is actually affected.
Well, the common challenge that we have in this field is time management. Of course, we have a limited time to do our worship services, and then handling the service, making it to flow from time to time, and also being able to attract the attention of the people within a span of 2 hours, also in the morning and also 2 hours in the afternoon. It's quite a huge task. So being able to have that time management and also controlling people in a way that they can also be time conscious is quite a difficult task. And also we have an equipment that is basic, so we may have technical hitches here and there, but we thank God that you're able to still manage and stream live our services.
The most difficult experience in this live streaming program has been getting the right equipment and at the right time, because with this pandemic it's been really tough for us to get the right equipment, because of course with the movements and importation and all that, but also the team to upskill, because as I stated, we started on a very rough background, because as a church we were not streaming these we were not streaming our programs online, and the team had to upskill and be able to make sure that the equipment, even the equipment that we are getting, they're well versed with it, and be able also to work on the modality of working. Now as a team we needed to find out now what is the best way for us to work as a team, and also to make sure that we have different categories that will make us easily collaborate as a team and work together, so that as a team, using that teamwork, then we'll be able to make streaming experience to be better. So with those difficulties, I think we learned a lot from them, and I think it's coming out strongly as a blessing. And as church members, I think you can see the benefit so far.
So the year of the Lord 2020, a year that we all remember, or rather we will live to remember. So we, as usual, we sat down and planned for a camp meeting. We used to call it Camp Meeting 2020. It was meant to be a huge thing. It was our first time to plan. The team was fairly new with a lot of ideas, brilliant ideas, and the team was very dedicated and committed to just bring out the best that could be. Yeah, and there's a lot that went into planning, including but not limited to getting speakers from abroad. By abroad I meant we had 2 speakers from Zambia. We had speakers from around as far as Western Kenya, and it was all set. It was all systems go. By the time it was March, we had already secured a venue for the camp meeting. As Parklanders, we always do a real camp meeting. We go out of our homes and just go and do a real camp somewhere. We had done all that. We had done pre-registrations, and so many people had even paid up, and man, it was meant to be the best. Then March comes, Corona comes, and the president locks down the country. So at first we were not very sure what that meant, but as cases went on rising, it became serious, and it became apparent that we were not meant to do our normal camp meeting, because now we couldn't congregate, we couldn't travel to wherever, we couldn't, it was just chaotic. But then this brilliant team again came up with an idea of a virtual camp meeting. At first we didn't even know what that meant. It's something that has never happened. But we walked in faith, and we said, why not? We will do this. And I remember the team just trying to crack how this is meant to be done. And at the end of the day, as we speak, it was a success. It was a success. Yeah, we can talk about it and laugh about it and enjoy that it happened. Yeah.
I think for me, the highlight of online church was camp meeting. I loved camp meeting. The experience was good, even if we were at home. I feel it opened up camp meeting in a way that we've never experienced it before. Like how we got to have a different group singing every day for camp meeting. Before that would have been unheard of. It would have been very difficult. But it was very simple during this time. And we managed to have 2 speakers from completely different places. And it's not that simple to get that and to do that. And one speaker was in an entirely different country, but he still managed to speak to us and to touch us and to bless us. So for me, camp meeting and other similar things, other similar evangelistic campaigns were the highlight of online church.
So once we embarked to thinking about a virtual camp meeting, before even actualizing it, one of the challenges that we had was we did not have anyone to benchmark from. It has not happened in the past. We even tried to get to our sister churches to ask them what they were doing, and no one really wanted to go that way. No one was sure how it was supposed to happen, and interestingly, they actually did not even do the camp meeting as scheduled. They did their camp meetings. Most of them did their camp meetings later in the year, and we said, we are not going to push this. We were meant, these challenges are with us, and we have to move things as planned. Of course, with a few variations here and there. Yeah, it happened.
I think for me, the experience that was most powerful was the camp meeting. The fact that we were able to have our camp meeting just at the same time that we had planned it, and it felt very good. It felt very good to have camp meeting at the same time, and the programs were uplifting, to have the same presenters, to have Shikuku, and to have even the speaker from Zambia. It was great. Camp meeting, I think, was a high for me in this online worship.
So when it became apparent that we are meant to do the virtual camp meeting, the original camp meeting committee had to be reinforced and empowered. And the extraordinary committee was born. And what this committee was meant to do was just to make sure that everything ran as planned. Its composition was super, and I always say that we owe the success of the camp meeting to that, the extraordinary camp meeting committee, because it actually made it happen. And why I say this, there was a whole team that was working on content. And by content, I mean, now that we could not get our speakers to Nairobi from all over, we had to think about how to still have the same speakers, create content, and send, and how, again, some of them would air their content live. So we had to do a bit of adjustments on the content, so there was a whole committee that did that. It also answered the how question, how are they supposed to do that? Then there was the communication committee in the extraordinary CAM meeting committee, and that was purely tasked to advise on how. Now the actual thing was meant to happen. And then there was the executive subcommittee now that was simply to oversee everything and to make sure that everything works as planned. And and that was our pastor and elders and elders on board. And it happened. It actually happened. Yeah.
The best experience has been during the camp meeting, because during the camp meeting is when we saw the benefit, the real benefit of having an online streaming program, because through this we were able to stream and to get the Word of God for a whole week from morning to evening. And we really want to thank God for the opportunity we got from live streaming, because it has really shown us as a church that we can actually deliver more in terms of evangelism and also in terms of reaching out to more people as opposed to just reaching out to the members. So the camp meeting was really a blessing to me and my family, especially now that I have a small family.
One of the things that I can say is the prayers were answered, and the prayers that were answered was that it happened. It actually happened. That was the most remarkable. Leave alone how, which was also a success, the how and where and everything was a success. But the fact that it happened was a single most point of, I would say, a blessing to us as a committee and a blessing to the church. The second thing that I remember is that it was seamless. Interestingly, the first time it has not happened, but it was seamless. And what I mean by seamless, the programs began at 6 every single day at 6 a.m. and the last program ended at 10 p.m. And for the 7 days that we held the CAM meeting, every day that happened. And that was really remarkable. Something else that I remember vividly is the children's program. I think that was, for me, that was the highlight of the CAM meeting, because I couldn't imagine, initially I couldn't imagine that we could have a children's program and having like 5 classes, 5 different classes, children classes. And children were having very, 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 very physical and practical kind of activities. But remember, it was done on Zoom. And I could get into the various rooms that the teachers were teaching children at home, and you could tell a lot was happening. Serious things were happening on those CAM meetings, and then finally the kind of feedback that came from both the children, the parents, and the people at large, the congregation was just amazing. Yeah, we have all the reasons to thank God that He made it happen.
I think what I've learned from this experience is that you have to put in effort in whatever you're doing in this life, because now we have to put in effort to reach out to our friends and churchmates who we had taken for granted, people who you knew, come rain, come sunshine, I'll see you on Sabbath. Now you won't see them on Sabbath. So unless you make time to reach out, to connect, to share, you won't have that connection that you once had. At the same time, you have to put in time in your relationship with God, because now there's no longer Sabbath, which makes you stop and rest and and meditate. You have to put in that time personally so that you can sit down somewhere, be prayerful and connect with Him, because God is no longer found, quote unquote, in church. He has to be found now wherever you can look for Him. And we can no longer take for granted the things that church used to give us. we have to be really precious with them, because as we've seen, you never know when they can be taken away from you. It was physical worship. Sometime in the future, it could be church service altogether, and you'll have to be able to survive on your own. So I think it has put us in a position that we have to be more intentional with our Christianity and our walk with God.
First lesson, the church will be closed. We have no control over what government does, and we need to be aware of our role, that our purpose is to keep the word of God burning. The second lesson is it takes a lot of sacrifice. The teams that work on these things, the resources that go into it, that is a lesson that I have learned, that nothing happens out of nothing. There's always someone who has to sacrifice. The third thing is we must, all of us, be ready to work together. From the pastoral, the elders team, to the departments, the leadership, and then the third thing is the members coming on board and contributing, whether through resources or through their time or through their ideas. Those three things are of great, great value, and they are lessons we have learned so far.
I think they are tremendous lessons. And to begin with, I think you begin by looking at it in terms of our whole Christian experience. Where is it anchored? Is it anchored in a church building, or where is it anchored? Because that has been the clamor all over. We really want to go back to church. And there has almost been like an outcry that not being able to church is like being away from God, which is very far from the truth. Because we can have fellowship with God and we can be with God wherever we are. Our God is not in a building. He's not a Parklands church. He's with us wherever we are. And I think this period has reinforced that in a very special way, that we can still have fellowship with God, we can still talk to Him, He hears us, and in as much as fellowship with other believers is important, we can still be good Christians, even when we have to worship on our own. So I think that has really been reinforced during this time. I think something else that has also been reinforced is the fact that you need to work out your salvation for yourself. You can no longer just rely on outside help, on pastors, elders, and other members of the church. You have to learn to make time to study the Word of God by yourself, to do your lesson on your own, and also to have time to pray on your own. You can no longer just rely on church because church hasn't been there. So what does that mean? Does that mean that your relationship ends there, with God ends there? So I think there've been great lessons that we have learned from this period. We have also learned, of course, the importance of fellowship with other believers and what it means not to have it. I think when we were meeting physically, we probably took each other for granted. But now that we've been away from each other, we have learned to value each other more and to realize the benefits of, having that fellowship with one another. So I think going forward, we are going to value our time together more than we have done in the past, and try and make the best out of it. Many times in the past, we probably took each other for granted and were more keen to look at the negatives other than the positives. But now that we are away from one another, when you reflect upon it, you realize that there is more good in each one of us. And that's what we should focus on, and not on, the small things. We should focus on the whole picture. And I think the whole picture is good, and we should keep that in our focus all the time.
as individuals, there are so many lessons that you can draw from the shift between doing things the normal way and now that we got ourselves to virtual. One is, I'd say that virtual is such a beautiful opportunity for evangelism. I mean, there's just endless limits to the people who are able to watch, to the people who are able to get the messages. And I would say that because I saw a viewership from all over the world, and that for us was quite a thing, you know. And we could reach out to people we ordinarily wouldn't. And then secondly, I found it easier to invite friends, and I would say maybe friends who are not of our faith, to join in our program by sharing a YouTube link or a Zoom link. And it was very easy, and we got very many people watching who are not Adventists, and they were blessed by the messages that we had prepared for them, and that was a highlight for us. And then something else, the fact that we could reorganize ourselves so fast. We just need to be dynamic in even our thinking as a church, dynamic and being able to, you know, adjust to changing times, because clearly from now people know that things might change. Today we might be talking about virtual. I don't know what next might come, but yeah, people should be ready for anything.
I have learned how to be resourceful, you know. Necessity, we're told, is the mother of invention. Who knew it would come to a time where we'd air whole services, you know, you get to church hop, where the most integral part of worship of church would be technology. Having a camera now is more important than having enough seats in the church, you know.
Every individual member, if say we had 1,000 members in this church, if each individual member shared a program or a virtual session even once, that's another 1,000 members. And from what I've learned from people who have over 1 million views on YouTube, is that it takes just 1,000 people to reach 1 million, and it takes 1 million to reach 1 billion. Your participation, your idea, your sharing, your social network, your WhatsApp group, that is what it takes to have a successful virtual church. And I know that if we all work on this together, we will achieve our great dream of keeping the fire of God's word burning, not just here, but all around the world. Yes.
The virtual experience has really brought in a number of hidden resources for us as a church, not just as communication team, but for us as a church, because with online experience, of course we didn't used to do this before the pandemic as a church, but with online experience, it's really shown us as a church that we can tap in and take in a lot of talents that we have in our members and be able to reach out to more members, or rather to more people outside there, because a virtual experience has shown us that we can really engage with more people than the number of people we have in church. Look at the limitations that we have in church. I'll give you a very good example. We have space limitations as a church, but with virtual experience, it has shown us as a church that we can actually move beyond the virtual space, or rather beyond the space limitation that we have, because through that we can reach out to people everywhere. You can preach to someone who is outside the country. You can preach to someone who is in a different location in the same country, and many other things. Apart from that one, of course, we can also shoot our own programs. We can have a series of programs and even participate even in our local media stations and see how we can bring in very interesting series of discussions, whether you're talking about family life, whether you're talking about cooking classes and many other things that we can tap in, especially with the talent that we have with our youthful church, and also with many members of the church who are really talented.
The vision that we had of over 52 ministries in this church was to provide a platform where church members, church departments can create programs. They can create content that would go beyond what we do on the pulpit here. That has not yet happened, so that has been a disappointment to me. But I think that it can be remedied by the development plan we have. As we build a church, as we give towards creating the infrastructure that we need as a church, we can do that with our virtual programs. We can record the way the communication team is doing now. We can have cooking, we can have children, we can have health, the way we did with camp meeting. So that is my dream. I hope that we can do something about that. But so far we thank God that we are here where we are.
People went out of their way, volunteered their time and resources to make sure this happens. When you talk about the teams that made this happen, when you talk about the communication team, when you talk about the content team, most of our young people were involved in this, and let me tell you, if that we couldn't even pay them. If we were to pay them, it's just priceless. The amount of time they spend, the amount of energy, the amount of resources, and I'll also say expertise. If it wasn't for them, it couldn't have happened. And as a church, I would say that we are blessed because we did not even outsource for these people. These people just were our members that volunteered. And I saw other places, people getting other people to just run their programs before now they took over. We started well, and it is well, and we are growing day by day. The future is bright.
There are things that online can never really measure up to, like attending a concert in church. The feeling is not the same no matter how much you try, or the feeling of just congregational singing together. That, and the most important, Holy Communion. For those of us who have not had Holy Communion in a year, I think that's one of the reasons why we look forward to church opening.
I think the best experience is knowing that you're working for God, and also working with people who are wonderful, people who are willing to teach you in terms of where technically you don't know. So it's a good task for God, and we're able to minister to people through the equipment that you see on board.
I am looking forward, by the way, for even the littlest of reasons, as I miss dressing up for church, by the way. I really do. You know, you wake up, even the whole process of looking for the clothes to wear, I miss. I think now, you know, some of the things we took for granted, even that little act of, waking up, or even if it's the rush, or if you had a ministry in the morning, you know, you miss it, you really do. You miss even, and we'll be honest, sometimes zoning out of the sermon in church to look at the walls and just people. It's the little things. And of course now the bigger picture, the worship, the being able to sing and and harmonizing with people close to you.
I think you really can't replace that feeling of being in church with others, fellowshipping, singing, listening to sermons, and having interactive sessions like lesson discussion. I have spent a lot of my time in the children's classes. It's much easier to teach children in person than to teach them on Zoom. So I miss that part. I would love to go back to church. I pray that this pandemic will subside so that we can be able to go back to church, we can be able to continue with our fellowship, and we can continue with our programs, growing our children, and everyone else fellowshipping together. We miss the lunch fellowship. So we'd like to go back to church.
Let me quote the book of Hebrews, chapter 13, verse 5, that says that I will never leave you, I will never forsake you. So even if there is a lockdown, even if the physical contact is not there, I want to assure my brothers, my sisters, my daughter, my sons, and every member who benefit from these channels from Parklands SDA Church, that we may be locked by the government. We may be forced to stay at home by COVID-19, but the promise of God is, I will never leave you, I will never forsake you.
We have come from very far as a church because we come from a time when we didn't used to stream, but now we are streaming and the future looks very bright as a church.
There is the hope for the future. In the book of Revelation, John the Revelator says that I saw in that home there was no sea. The reason being that when John was in the island of Patmos, he was totally disconnected from the rest of the world because of the sea. That was the barrier by then. But John in a vision says, I saw in that new home, in that new Jerusalem, there will be no sea. If I apply it today, I can just tell you, I have also seen in that home, there will be no lockdown, there will be no COVID-19 rules and regulations. It is a beautiful home that we all of us hope to be. Let's be encouraged and stand firm in the faith.
According to the word of God, the book of Job, chapter 8, verse 7 and verses 21, it says, though your beginning is small or was small, yet your latter end will increase abundantly.